The origin of the competition, basically the call for proposals, was part of the whole Land Art New Mexico that took place in, I think, 2009, 2010. Numerous venues all over the state, different projects that were generally outside galleries as well as inside galleries that had to do with land art, putting New Mexico on the map for what it's kind of known for. The language in the call for proposals was an iconic piece that would mark the presence of the Open Space Visitor Center in the genre of land art. So land art incorporates the landscape in the art piece in one way or another. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but I do remember that it was literally one of those drawings on a napkin in a diner that I had read about the proposal. I thought about it briefly. I think that the first element of it that came to me was there should be some way to use those jeddy-jacks. The jeddy-jacks being these tripodal angle irons, 16 feet long, strung across various parts of the bosque as flood control measures that went in way back in the late 1930s, early 40s. They themselves seem iconic to me. They began to build dams upstream to control the flow of the river and control irrigation and that sort of thing. So the jeddy-jacks became obsolete. Bit by bit, I'm beginning to sort of hear more about the jeddy-jacks, and meanwhile, that plan in my head that started with this little napkin drawing began to evolve and change, and at some point, I can't remember exactly where, I connected it to the birds. I connected it to mainly the cranes. Hearing those cranes flying overhead every summer, every fall, that honking noise that they make, and you look up and you don't see anything in the sky, and you keep looking, and then finally way up there you see a little sun glint off a wing or something like that, and you go, oh my gosh, there's a whole V, and you go, oh my gosh, it's the whole sky, it's a whole long chain of birds up there. So that became, I realized, something that's connected to the Rio Grande, connected to the bosque, and therefore connected to the site. The Open Space Visitor Center is right tucked into the bosque, and it's all about the bosque, and it's all about the Rio Grande, and therefore it's all about this flyway that these birds have been using for a long, long time. Then I thought, well, this is really an homage piece, and it's an homage to migrating birds. And I think I'll call it Flyway. And I don't remember when I got the title, but I thought that was an appropriate title. There are all these wonderful, unplanned things that came out of this shape and the movement of driving by the shape. And they all seem to refer one way or another to birds or the landscape. My wife, Holly Roberts, is an artist. Being with Holly, I was always around art. She's always been a working artist. So art's always been in my life. Art is where Holly and I live. You know, I mean, always coming home to Holly. I'm in this sometimes enviable, sometimes difficult position of looking at the work that Holly just did. And she has, you know, very, very difficult questions sometimes about what is working or not working. You know, she needs another set of eyes.
Because otherwise it's like you're going out naked.
So it's not anything that was work for me. I really have always enjoyed it, being that set of eyes and looking and making aesthetic judgments. Even while I was going to medical school, I was still doing it. I think that being a doctor, for me, never really was an obsession. I would say that art is, not that I'm terribly prolific or, you know, but I always seem to be interested in art. I'm always working at it. If I had a choice between reading a medical book and looking at art, I'd be looking at art. Watching Holly and drawing and learning how to paint and doing sculpture and you know, after medical school and training, I did family practice residency in Phoenix. We moved to Zuni, and I worked with the Indian Health Service on the Zuni Pueblo. That's a whole culture that's kind of based on art, you know, I mean, with the jewelry and the pottery and you know, it's a very visual part of New Mexico, a very beautiful area to live in. It was there, really. We lived next to this junkyard. And I would hop the fence, go around, look for junk, but in the front door, there's a piece right there that is basically recycled junk. And so I started doing more and more sculpture out of stuff that was found on the ground. And, you know, I was there to be a doctor, but it was an opportunity for me to kind of further my interest in art, my doing of art, my eventual career in art. This is the original conception of the piece that was more of just an arch, a very symmetrical arch. And since that time it has changed shape, so it's much more front-loaded and severe in the angle in the front, so it's more like a foil now with a trail off to the south, loaded to the front. And just statically looking at that, I believe now it has more motion, more forward-moving motion than this more formal arch. So that the first elements are a little closer together, and instead of being a true arch, it's sort of a foil. So it has this wing shape. In a nutshell, Flyway is an array of 96 jeddy-jack angle irons, 6 rows, 16 rows of 6. And they angle from the north to the south, true north to true south. I wanted this piece to be as if coming out of a mound. The mound, when I say mound, I think of those mound builder tribes that were in the Midwest. I love the subtlety of those mounds. I think that's some of the first land art that we probably have in the United States. So I like the idea of these elements emerging or looking like they're emerging from a mound. The movement thing that I began to see once we put it on a computer animation just amazed me how much it had to do with birds. I wanted it to be oriented true north-south because it's an homage to migrating birds. So when those birds fly over, I want them to be looking down on this piece and see that it's right in their pathway. The idea that they will be flying exactly in the rows that are created by Flyway is really appealing to me. And that motion is, as you're driving towards it, it's a down motion. As you drive away from it, it's an up motion. And it very much reminded me of the idea of birds taking off, these sort of waves of motion as you drive away from it. It was meant to be a piece that you drive by, right? There's 45,000 cars a day that drive by this site on Coors. So I think, as well as being an iconic piece, I think for you to be able to appreciate it driving by, not having to stop and walk to it, was a key thing in my mind. If it's going to be right on the edge of Coors, one of the major thoroughfares here in Albuquerque, I really thought it should be a visual treat for those people. Now, all this stuff, I don't know if it's going to happen for sure. Everything that I've planned and began to work towards is meant to do that. But I mean, that's the great mystery of the piece. Facility Build is the construction company that I'm contracting to actually build the piece on site. So a laborer and I brought these pieces over in one day.
And this is our first of 3 loads of 144 of these angle irons that come from the jeddy-jacks. And they're stored at the MRGCD yard. We had a lot of help getting them onto the truck when we were out there.
And we realized we moved about 10 tons of steel in 3 loads on a flatbed truck. It is a project that involves a lot of people that are going to be contracted and provide their expertise and their manual labor. Once I started working on the pieces in my backyard, Tom Woodard is a welder and a solar engineer who was able to help me plasma torch the tops of these jeddy-jacks into the shape of feather tips.
So we're trying to give lightness to the whole piece, and part of it is to get rid of the angles at the top. At the bottoms here, where it will weld to the weld plates, we're going to be making cuts that will allow us to get exactly the degree of angle that we want up from the weld plate.
Matt Eaton is my welder, both in my backyard for cutting the pieces at the right angle.
Matt's making a template to direct a cut on the bottom of a row of jeddy-jacks that will give us the proper standing angle of the jeddy-jacks.
So that they will weld to the weld plates, and then he'll be the welder who's going to be welding these pieces in place. So he'll be working with me as the art director and the facility build people and their subcontractors like cement, concrete companies and so forth to actually install the piece.
Two, we want to go back south a little bit more. 1.
Almost ready for you guys to let go. Alright, you guys are probably okay to let go of everything.
Good.
It was difficult. It's a narrow site, as you probably know. It's narrow with a detention pond on one side and Coors Boulevard and the bar ditch on the other side. And then there's sagebrush and cactus and grasses out there. You know, this is land art, so we don't want to change too much. We want to sort of move in among the elements of the landscape. The hours of thinking and walking the neighborhood and losing sleep and trying to, you know, help organize all these other people that we're organizing, I'm probably down to about $3 an hour. That'll be all right. I didn't realize how much work, how much effort, how much thought was going to have to go into dealing with politics and bureaucracy. And there were a couple of other, you know, little bureaucratic battles that seemed difficult, and the more of those that we had, the more I realized they were just problems, and every problem could be solved. And I stopped thinking that everything was going to kill the project. But for a while there, it was that kind of anxiety. The controversy was very interesting. Interesting is the wrong word. It was anxiety provoking. It was energy stealing. It was kept me up nights, and you know, it was difficult actually to get through that. Selection committee had about 12 people on it, and these are volunteers. They're putting in their time because they've been asked to put it in. They select the piece that then has to be sort of ratified or voted on or voted in by the Albuquerque Arts Board. And the Arts Board people are also volunteers. I mean, the work that they do is for the beautification and for the benefit of Albuquerque. 2 carefully selected bodies that had contributed their efforts and selected the piece and approved it. It then has to go on to approval by the various offices in the city. Mayor Barry, early on, last January, one of the first things he did was to approve the piece. This is the selected piece. going to listen to what the art board said. Okay, we're moving forward with it. We have the budget. It's 1% for public art. We'll move ahead. At that point, then, it goes to subcommittees, and eventually the council vote would be the final thing. So in one of the subcommittees, which was the finance committee, the head of that committee was the councilman in the area where the piece is going to be built. And as I said, he had objections to it. So he got 2 more votes in this committee of 5. So by a 3-2 vote in this committee of 5, they voted to kill the piece and not send it on to the full council for final approval. It caught me and public art and everybody else by surprise. So at that point, Flyway was dead.
That concludes the public comments for EC-82. Let's open the floor to the council, Councilor Lewis, and then Councilor Garduño.
There was a council meeting shortly after that. And if we got 4 out of the 5 votes to say this project should come to a vote in front of the full council, then we could fight it and later on try to get it approved by the full council. Early in the summer, we got the 4 votes that said it should come to the full council. So we had a little victory there. And then on through the summer, there were a lot of people in town that put a lot of effort into getting this piece approved. We had a number of meetings with the neighborhood. I actually walked the neighborhood, Bosque Meadow neighborhood, took a survey. And the overwhelming feeling about the piece is that it should be built, and it should be built as soon as possible. I believe it was the August 2nd council meeting, and we only had 4 votes for it. So we needed to switch 1 vote. We spent the whole summer, as many people as possible, talking to as many councilors as possible. And we had a lot of good meetings, a lot of good support, but we didn't know if that would translate into a vote. We didn't know where the vote might come from, if the vote was going to come our way, but we needed 1 vote. So the meeting got started. We had placards about Flyway, presentations, and then the discussion among the council people.
You would acknowledge that whether we voted on this up or down tonight, that either way would be honoring of that process, wouldn't you say?
I would say yes. Whatever you vote, I would accept, but I have not heard good logical reasons for the no vote. And that's what I tried to say.
Yeah, but I also want to acknowledge, and I think it's true, that art is in the eye of the beholder. But I believe it's just very difficult to behold, this particular art project, and especially during these economic times, at a time when we're forcing people to take cuts to salaries. Our museums, our programs, our services have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars in cuts. And so I think we must all acknowledge that there's a shared sacrifice.
If you kill the piece, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make money available for any of that. It had been budgeted in 1% for public art. There wasn't anything else that money could be used for unless it was to be used in the arts.
Councilor Cook, and then Council Vice President Jones, and then Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've literally wrestled with this particular vote for a few weeks now, and today I've changed my mind 3 or 4 times even, and I was hoping to have, and my gut keeps telling me to vote for this project. I haven't seen one citizen get up yet and say, to speak out against this project, and I was really surprised at that. Not one single person.
And Michael Cook, God bless his soul, said, I don't know why I'm so emotional about this, but he said, I have to look at myself in the morning, and I can see a lot of good reasons to vote for this piece, and I can't see any good reasons to vote against it. So I'm going to change my vote to yes.
I'm going to go with my gut on this one and vote for it.
And at that point, the chamber, erupted in applause. And we knew that we had the 5 votes, and we went on and built the piece. So, it was an emotional period of time. I mean, we thought it was dead, and then it came back. So, it was a good moment. The controversy comes first from the fact that it's art. I think that good public art is probably going to be controversial. And I mean, I can look at people who are much bigger, greater public artists than I, and like Christo, he did work that was land art, I guess, and the things that he did were so controversial, there was so much dislike of them. I think he was a real politician. He was able to really represent what he was doing with a good heart and sort of bring it to people, explain it to people, describe it to people, and get a kind of a groundswell of support for it. I know that if it's not controversial, then it doesn't have an edge and it's not very good art. So I would expect that there's going to be criticism and so forth going into it, but that's okay.